My beloved brothers and sisters, when someone hurts you, the first urge is often to react, to explain your pain, defend yourself, or prove them wrong. But Islam teaches us a deeper strength. Not every response needs words. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any argument, and dignity leaves a mark that noise never could. The people who hurt you often expect a reaction. They expect emotion, chaos, or confrontation. But when you choose calm over conflict and restraint over retaliation, something shifts. Your silence unsettles them, not because you are playing games, but because you are no longer feeding the situation with your energy. This reminder is about quiet strength, the kind that protects your heart, preserves your dignity, and leaves others reflecting on their actions. These are not behaviors rooted in ego or revenge, but in self-respect, wisdom, and trust in Allah. When you move with silence and character, Allah handles the rest. You stop explaining yourself. One of the most powerful shifts a believer makes after being hurt is deciding to stop explaining themselves. Explaining often comes from the hope of being understood, validated, or believed. But Islam teaches us that not every heart is meant to understand you, and not every ear is meant to hear your truth. When you constantly explain yourself, you place your peace in the hands of people who may never intend to give it back. Allah did not command you to convince everyone. He commanded you to walk with sincerity. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your emotional energy. You stop reopening wounds just to make others comfortable. This does not mean you become rude or distant. It means you become selective and wise. Allah already knows your intentions, your struggles, and your truth. That knowledge alone is enough. Silence becomes a form of trust, and trust brings peace to the heart. Many people hurt themselves more after the wound by trying to explain it away. They revisit the pain repeatedly, hoping their words will change how others see them. But often, explanations only invite judgment, debate, or denial. Islam protects the believer from this cycle. When you stop explaining yourself, you break free from emotional dependence on people's opinions. You accept that misunderstanding does not reduce your worth. Allah never measures your value by how well others comprehend your choices. He measures it by sincerity and faith. This realization brings relief. The heart stops striving for approval and starts resting in certainty. You move forward lighter, no longer burdened by the need to clarify every step of your journey. Stopping explanations is not silence born from fear. It is silence born from strength. Fear explains, strength trusts. The believer who trusts Allah knows that truth does not need constant defense. Over time, actions speak louder than explanations ever could. Character reveals what words cannot. Islam teaches us that dignity is preserved not by arguing, but by consistency. When you stop explaining yourself, you allow your character to speak naturally. Those who are sincere will understand without effort. Those who are not were never meant to be convinced. This understanding saves the heart from exhaustion and protects Iman from unnecessary strain. Often, explanations are driven by the ego's desire to be right. But faith teaches us to let go of that desire. Being right in Allah's sight is more important than being right in people's eyes. When you stop explaining yourself, you free your heart from competition and defensiveness. You no longer feel attacked by misunderstanding. You accept it as part of life. This acceptance is powerful. It transforms pain into calm and confusion into clarity. Allah loves hearts that are settled, not constantly agitated by the need to justify themselves. The Prophet ﷺ was misunderstood more than anyone, yet he did not chase people to explain himself endlessly. He conveyed the message and trusted Allah with the outcome. This prophetic example teaches us restraint. Explaining has its place, but constant defense weakens the soul. Islam values balance. When explanation becomes harmful, silence becomes wisdom. The believer learns to recognize this line. When crossed, they step back without resentment. This restraint reflects maturity in faith. Stopping explanations also protects your healing. Healing requires space. Every explanation reopens the wound, forcing the heart to relive what should be left behind. Islam encourages moving forward with dignity. When you stop explaining yourself, you allow healing to happen quietly. Time, prayer, and reflection do their work. Allah replaces pain with understanding, not through words, but through growth. This growth is gentle and lasting. Some people will accuse you of being cold or distant when you stop explaining. But Islam teaches us that boundaries are not cruelty. They are protection. You are not obligated to expose your inner world to everyone. Allah values privacy because privacy preserves peace. When you stop explaining yourself, you decide who deserves access to your story. This decision is not arrogance, it is wisdom guided by faith. Stopping explanations also teaches self-respect. You realize that your life does not require constant narration. You are allowed to exist without commentary. This realization is freeing. The heart becomes calmer, less reactive and more grounded. Allah does not want His servants living in emotional defense mode. He wants them standing firm with trust in Him. When explanations end, reliance on Allah increases. You stop turning to people for reassurance and start turning to prayer. Dua replaces debate. Remembrance replaces justification. This shift strengthens Iman deeply. The believer feels closer to Allah because they are no longer distracted by people's perceptions. This closeness brings peace no explanation could provide. Stopping explanations also prevents regret. Words spoken in defense often return as regret later. Silence avoids this. It keeps your record clean and your conscience clear. Islam values restraint because restraint protects both dunya and akhirah. The believer who restrains themselves gains control over their tongue and heart. This control is strength. As you stop explaining yourself, you notice a change in how you move through life. You become quieter, not weaker, calmer, not detached. Your presence carries confidence because it is not seeking validation. This confidence is rooted in faith. Allah supports those who rely on Him rather than on people's understanding. In the end, stopping explanations is not about withdrawing from the world. It is about anchoring yourself in Allah. You accept that being misunderstood is part of the journey, but being at peace is a choice. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop bleeding for clarity and start healing with trust. And that choice brings dignity, strength, and a peace that words could never give. You maintain dignified silence. Maintaining dignified silence is one of the most misunderstood strengths in Islam. Many people assume that silence means surrender, fear, or weakness, but dignified silence is none of these. It is a conscious decision to protect the heart from unnecessary harm. When you are wronged, mocked, or misunderstood, silence becomes a form of self-respect. You are not ignoring the pain, you are choosing not to add chaos to it. Islam teaches us that honor is preserved through restraint, not noise. A believer who maintains dignified silence does not rush to explain, defend, or retaliate. They trust that Allah sees what others distort and knows what others deny. This trust settles the heart. It removes the urgency to prove anything. Silence becomes a shield, guarding dignity when emotions are high and clarity is low. That calm presence itself becomes a statement stronger than words. Dignified silence is not emotional suppression, it is emotional mastery. The believer acknowledges hurt internally but refuses to let it dictate behavior. This mastery is a form of sabr that Islam praises. Reacting loudly often gives power to the one who caused the pain. Silence quietly takes that power back. It communicates that your peace is not available for misuse. When someone expects a reaction and receives calm instead, the dynamic shifts. The believer remains centered while the situation loses its grip. This composure reflects inner strength rooted in faith. Allah loves those who restrain themselves, especially when they are capable of reacting. That restraint is not accidental. It is cultivated through remembrance, prayer, and trust in divine justice. Maintaining dignified silence also preserves character. Words spoken in pain often damage reputation, relationships, and self-respect. Silence prevents these outcomes. It protects you from saying something that may satisfy the ego briefly but burden the soul later. Islam values foresight. Dignified silence looks beyond the moment and considers consequences. It chooses peace over pride and wisdom over impulse. The believer understands that not every truth needs to be spoken immediately and not every wrong needs to be corrected publicly. Allah's timing is more precise than human urgency. When you trust that timing, silence becomes easier and more meaningful. The Prophet ﷺ demonstrated dignified silence repeatedly. He endured insults, false accusations and mockery without reacting impulsively. His silence was never emptiness, it was depth. It carried patience, confidence and reliance on Allah. This prophetic example teaches us that dignity is preserved when the heart remains anchored in faith. Silence allowed the Prophet ﷺ to focus on his mission rather than distractions. Similarly, the believer who maintains dignified silence protects their purpose. They do not allow hurt to derail growth. Their energy remains directed toward what benefits the soul rather than feeding conflict. Dignified silence also prevents escalation. Many conflicts grow not because of the initial harm, but because of how it is answered. One reaction invites another, and the cycle continues. Silence breaks this cycle. It removes fuel from the fire. Islam encourages believers to stop harm at its root, not spread it further. When silence replaces reaction, tension fades. Even if others continue, the believer remains steady. This steadiness often forces reflection in those who expected confrontation. Silence becomes a mirror, revealing behavior without accusation. Allah uses this quiet restraint to teach lessons words could never deliver. Maintaining dignified silence does not mean abandoning boundaries. Silence and boundaries can exist together. You may choose not to argue, but you also choose not to engage. You step back with calm clarity. Islam allows distance when closeness causes harm. Silence supports this distance without hostility. It communicates finality without bitterness. The believer does not need to announce boundaries loudly. Consistency makes them clear. This approach preserves relationships where possible and protects peace where necessary. Allah rewards those who act with balance rather than extremes. Silence also protects sincerity. When you speak too much, intentions can become mixed. You may begin speaking to be validated rather than to please Allah. Dignified silence removes this temptation. It redirects the heart toward Allah alone. The believer stops seeking understanding from people and starts trusting Allah's complete knowledge. This redirection strengthens Iman. A heart aligned with Allah does not panic when misunderstood. It rests in certainty. Silence becomes a spiritual anchor rather than a social tactic. Dignified silence teaches patience in a world that demands instant reaction. This patience refines the soul. It trains the believer to pause, reflect, and choose wisely. Over time, this practice reshapes character. The believer becomes less reactive and more observant. They listen more and speak less. This awareness deepens wisdom. Allah grants wisdom to those who restrain themselves. Silence creates space for that wisdom to grow. Maintaining dignified silence also preserves mental and emotional health. Constantly defending oneself is exhausting. It keeps wounds open and prevents healing. Silence allows the heart to rest. Rest restores clarity. Clarity strengthens faith. Islam values the well-being of the believer because a healthy heart worships better. When peace is protected, prayer becomes focused, remembrance becomes sincere, and trust becomes deeper. Silence supports all of this quietly. Some may misinterpret dignified silence as indifference, but Allah judges by intention, not perception. When silence is chosen for peace and faith, Allah records it as wisdom. People's assumptions do not reduce its value. The believer learns to live without managing everyone's opinion. This freedom is powerful. It removes anxiety and replaces it with calm reliance on Allah. Dignity thrives in this freedom. Over time, dignified silence builds confidence. The believer no longer feels the need to explain or justify themselves. Their presence becomes calm and assured. This confidence is not arrogance, it is trust. Trust that Allah will handle what they release. Trust that truth does not need constant defense. Trust that character will speak in time. Allah honors this trust. In the end, maintaining dignified silence is a form of worship. It protects the heart, preserves character, and strengthens reliance on Allah. It does not seek victory over people, but safety for the soul. And when silence is guided by faith and wisdom, you create distance without drama. Creating distance without drama is one of the most mature responses a believer can offer after being hurt. Many people believe distance must be loud, announced, or justified, but Islam teaches us that wisdom often moves quietly. When someone repeatedly causes pain, distance becomes protection, not punishment. You are not required to explain why you are stepping back, nor are you obligated to argue about your boundaries. Allah does not ask you to remain close to what harms your heart. Distance without drama preserves dignity. It avoids conflict while still honoring self-respect. The believer who chooses this path understands that peace is not found in confrontation, but in calm withdrawal. This choice prevents the heart from being pulled into unnecessary emotional storms. It allows healing to begin without creating new wounds. Distance, when chosen with wisdom, becomes a mercy for the soul. Drama feeds on reaction. It grows when emotions are displayed, words are exchanged, and blame is thrown back and forth. Islam protects the believer from this cycle by encouraging restraint. Creating distance without drama removes the fuel drama needs to survive. When you quietly step back, you deny chaos the attention it seeks. This quiet decision unsettles conflict because it cannot escalate without participation. The believer remains calm while the situation loses its grip. This calm is not avoidance, it is clarity. It reflects inner strength rooted in faith. Allah loves those who protect their peace without harming others in the process. Distance without drama reflects emotional intelligence guided by Iman. Creating distance also prevents regret. Loud exits often leave scars, words spoken in anger, accusations made in pain, bridges burned unnecessarily. Islam teaches us to leave situations with dignity intact. When you step away quietly, you preserve your character. Character matters more than being heard. Allah values how you conduct yourself even when wronged. Distance without drama ensures that your record remains clean. You leave without bitterness, insults, or blame. This protects both your conscience and your reputation. The believer walks away without carrying the weight of shame or second guessing. Distance without drama also protects relationships from permanent damage. Not every separation needs to be final or hostile. Sometimes space allows reflection, healing, and perspective. When distance is created calmly, doors remain open if Allah wills reconciliation later. Drama slams doors shut. Islam values reconciliation but never at the cost of self-harm. Distance without drama balances both. It allows space while maintaining respect. Even if reconciliation never occurs, the believer leaves with peace, not resentment. This peace is a gift from Allah to those who act wisely. The Prophet ﷺ demonstrated this wisdom repeatedly. When faced with hostility, he did not chase conflict. He stepped away when necessary and engaged when beneficial. His actions were measured, not emotional. This prophetic balance teaches us that distance is sometimes the most merciful response. Mercy toward others and mercy toward oneself can coexist. Creating distance without drama follows this prophetic path. It allows the believer to prioritize faith, growth, and purpose without being consumed by conflict. Distance without drama also preserves mental and emotional health. Constant engagement with hurtful people drains energy and disrupts focus. Islam values the believer's well-being because it supports worship. A disturbed heart struggles to pray with presence. Distance restores calm. Calm strengthens remembrance. Remembrance deepens faith. This chain begins when the believer chooses peace over participation in drama. Allah wants His servants emotionally stable, not constantly reactive. Distance supports this stability quietly and effectively. Some people may misinterpret quiet distance as arrogance or coldness. Islam teaches us not to live by people's assumptions. Allah judges intentions, not perceptions. When distance is chosen for peace, Allah records it as wisdom. The believer does not owe explanations for protecting their heart. This realization brings freedom. You stop managing others' opinions and start honoring Allah's guidance. That freedom is powerful. It allows the heart to move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional baggage. Creating distance without drama also teaches self-respect. You realize that not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your life. Islam encourages boundaries because boundaries preserve dignity. Distance enforces those boundaries gently. It does not attack, it protects. The believer becomes selective, not bitter. This selectivity strengthens emotional balance. Allah grants wisdom to those who protect themselves without harming others. Distance without drama reflects that wisdom clearly. Distance also shifts focus inward. Instead of obsessing over what others did wrong, the believer redirects attention toward growth, healing, and faith. This shift transforms pain into progress. Islam encourages believers to grow through hardship, not remain trapped in it. Distance creates the environment necessary for that growth. It removes distractions and allows reflection. Reflection brings understanding. Understanding brings peace. Peace strengthens Iman. When distance is created quietly, it often speaks louder than confrontation. People notice the absence without being attacked. This absence invites reflection rather than defensiveness. Allah uses the silence to teach lessons words never could. The believer does not need to prove anything. Their calm withdrawal becomes the message. This message is dignified and firm. Over time, creating distance without drama becomes a habit of wisdom. The believer learns when to step back and when to engage. This discernment protects faith and character. Life becomes calmer. Relationships become healthier. The heart becomes lighter. Allah blesses those who act with balance rather than extremes. In the end, creating distance without drama is an act of faith. It shows trust in Allah's justice, confidence in one's worth, and commitment to peace. It does not seek revenge or validation. It seeks protection of the heart. And when the believer chooses this path sincerely, Allah replaces conflict with calm and pain with strength that lasts. You focus on your growth, not their opinion. Focusing on your growth instead of people's opinions is one of the most liberating decisions a believer can make. Opinions change, moods shift, and perceptions are often incomplete. Growth, however, is built slowly through sincerity, patience, and effort. Islam teaches us that your journey is between you and Allah, not between you and the crowd. When someone hurts you, it is easy to become distracted by what they think, say, or assume. That distraction drains energy that could be invested in becoming better. By redirecting your attention toward growth, you reclaim that energy. You stop living in reaction mode and start living with intention. Allah values progress over popularity. He measures success by effort and faith, not by applause. When your focus returns to growth, your heart becomes calmer, your goals become clearer, and your faith becomes stronger.